She said it loud enough for everyone at the dinner table to hear. "This old man is worthless. He's just taking up space." My daughter, my only child. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even look at her. I just set my fork down, stood up, and walked out of the house I once signed over to help her feel secure. Not one person followed me, not even her husband. But later that same night, I heard a knock at my door. It wasn't her. It was him, and what he told me still haunts me today. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. I was her whole world once. I still remember the first time she called me Daddy. Not Dad, not Pop. Just that soft, innocent Daddy, with her little fingers wrapped around mine like she never wanted to let go. That moment buried itself in my soul. I've lived through wars, funerals, and sleepless nights, but nothing ever made me feel more alive than holding her in my arms after Marjorie passed. She was only 4 when we lost her mother. Marjorie had been everything good in our world, warm, steady, the glue between our hearts. When cancer took her, it didn't just steal my wife. It stole my daughter's childhood in a way I didn't know how to stop, but I tried. God knows I tried. I worked double shifts at the mill so I could keep the lights on and still be the one packing her lunchbox. We lived in a modest ranch home in upstate New York. Nothing special, but to me, that house was sacred. Every creaky floorboard, every chipped window frame, every old doorknob had a memory attached to it. On Sundays, I made her waffles in the shape of hearts. They never looked quite right, but she'd laugh and drown them in syrup anyway. We'd sit on the porch afterward, her legs swinging off the step while I sipped black coffee, and she told me about her latest drawing or what the mean kid at school did. She was always talking, always full of color. She loved to draw back then. I still have a faded crayon picture she made when she was 8. It's us, holding hands under a big crooked sun, and she wrote, "Me and Daddy forever." She was my reason to stay soft in a hard world. I remember driving her to college for the first time. She was so nervous, pretending not to cry. I helped her set up her dorm, made her promise to call twice a week. She hugged me so tight that day, said, "I'll always come back home." And she did, for a while. When she graduated, I took out a second mortgage to help her with her first down payment. Her boyfriend, now husband, was still figuring himself out, and I wanted her to start her life strong. I didn't tell her how tight money had gotten. That wasn't her burden. That house, I helped her buy the same one where she later told me I was just taking up space, was once a dream we built together. I painted the nursery with her, put up shelves, changed light fixtures. I was there for everything she needed. Always. She used to call me her hero. Sometimes I sit and wonder what shifted, what moment, what tiny unseen fracture, turned that closeness into calculation. But back then in the good years, I didn't think like that. I believed love, real love, couldn't fade, that it was stronger than change, than time, than money. Looking back, I realize now, maybe I wanted to believe that because the alternative was too painful to face. But in those years, in the warmth of her smile and the sound of her laughter echoing down the hall, I truly thought we had something unbreakable. We had each other. We were a team. And no matter how cold things have gotten, no matter what came after, I still carry those memories like a locket in my chest. Because for a long time, she really did love me. She didn't stop loving me. She just stopped showing it. At first, I thought she was just busy. The calls became shorter, 5 minutes here, a quick voicemail there. The texts grew mechanical. Can't talk, we'll call later. But later often never came. I'd sit by the phone some nights, watching the screen like it might blink alive on its own. I told myself she had a demanding job, a house to manage, a husband to care for. That life was just happening to her. But deep down, something in me began to ache, a quiet ache. The kind you try to ignore because admitting it out loud would make it too real. One year, she forgot my birthday. Just forgot. No card, no call, not even a late, "Oops," I was swamped. That silence was louder than anything she could have said. I didn't bring it up. I didn't want to seem petty or needy. I just made myself a small dinner, lit a candle, and told myself that maybe she'd remember next year. She didn't. Still, I tried to stay involved. I'd offer to mow their lawn when I visited, or fix something broken. I brought over groceries sometimes, mostly things I knew her husband wouldn't think to buy. She'd thank me with a polite smile, but her eyes never really met mine, like she was always halfway out of the room. There were moments that cut sharper than they should have. One afternoon, I dropped off a few boxes of tools she asked for, and as I walked through the living room, I heard her murmur under her breath, "He just drops by unannounced now." I acted like I didn't hear it, but I did. Then there was the day she casually said, "Have you ever thought about moving into one of those senior condos? Like, for peace of mind?" I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. But her expression didn't change. She was serious. I said, "You worried I'll fall and can't get up?" She shrugged. "I mean, you're not as young as you used to be, Dad. And that house is kind of big for one person." That house, the same one Marjorie and I bought together. The same one where I raised her, patched, scraped knees, stayed up nights while she coughed through the flu, watched her open Christmas presents by the fireplace. That house was my history, my heartbeat, and she wanted me to downsize it into a one-bedroom box. I gave a small smile and changed the subject, but something inside me shifted. I started writing in a notebook after that, not daily, just when I felt too full. I didn't know what I was trying to capture. Maybe proof, maybe clarity, maybe just pieces of myself, so I wouldn't forget who I used to be before she started treating me like a relic. Her visits became more obligation than affection. 10 minutes, 15 if I was lucky. Sometimes she brought her laptop, kept working while I talked. One time, she brought a friend from work, introduced me as, "My dad, he's hanging in there," like I was some patient on life support. But still, I clung to the idea that this was just a phase. A busy season, people get overwhelmed, they lose track of time. Maybe she'd come back around. One day, she showed me a photo on her phone, some fancy new apartment building nearby, with a gym, pool, and senior-friendly living options. She smiled like she was offering me a cruise package. I nodded slowly, trying not to let the hurt crawl across my face. She said, "Wouldn't it be nice? Less stress, more comfort, and you wouldn't be alone all the time." I replied, "But I'm not alone. I have the house." She didn't say anything. That silence, it spoke louder than any insult. She didn't have to kick me out, or yell, or fight. She just stopped making room for me in her world. And when you love someone, being slowly erased is somehow worse than being abandoned. Because you watch it happen inch by inch, and there's no moment you can point to and say, "That's when it ended." It just fades, like a photograph left in the sun too long. I found out about the party from the grocery clerk. It was a Saturday morning when I ran into Ellie at the checkout line. She was holding a fruit platter and 2 bottles of wine, and she smiled when she saw me. "You heading over to Katie's today, too?" she asked, bagging her grapes. I blinked. "Katie's?" She tilted her head. "Her anniversary party. 5 years, right?" She said the whole neighborhood was invited. My throat dried up. I smiled politely and said, "Ah, must have slipped my mind." I bagged my apples and bread and walked out before she could say anything else. Slipped my mind. That was a lie, of course, because no one had told me anything. No call, no text, nothing in the mail, just silence. I stood by my truck for a while, keys in hand, staring at the cracked dashboard. 5 years. I remembered helping them move into that house. I remember installing the porch light myself and fixing the leaky kitchen faucet when their home inspector missed it. I even paid part of their closing costs. But I wasn't on the guest list. Still, I went home, shaved, pressed one of my better shirts, found an old bottle of cologne I hadn't used in years. It was faint, but it still smelled like dignity. I picked a bouquet of sunflowers from the roadside stand near the gas station. Marjorie used to love them, and Katie always said they reminded her of her mom. I pulled into the street and parked a little ways down, not right in front. I didn't want to make a scene. I wasn't there to ruin anything. I just wanted to be there. The front yard was full of balloons and lawn chairs. A banner hung from the porch. 5 years strong. Laughter bubbled from the backyard. Someone was grilling. I could smell the ribs from the sidewalk. I walked up the driveway, flowers in hand. The music dipped as I stepped into the backyard. Heads turned. Conversations paused. I recognized some faces, old neighbors, friends from Katie's childhood, even her high school math teacher. But not a single person greeted me. Then she saw me. Katie walked toward me, her heels clicking on the stone path, wine glass in hand. Her face shifted quickly, surprise, then discomfort, then a practiced smile. "Dad," she said lightly, "I didn't think you were coming." "I wasn't invited," I replied, handing her the sunflowers. She hesitated, then took them. "Oh, that must have been a mistake." "It wasn't no—" Her husband stood nearby, not meeting my eyes. He looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. "I thought it'd be nice to stop by," I said. "Wish you both well." "That's thoughtful," she said, looking over her shoulder, distracted. "But maybe we can catch up another time." It wasn't cruel, not directly, but it was dismissive. It was surgical, like extracting an unwanted thread from a dress you want to keep clean. "Some of your friends said hello," I added quietly. "They seemed surprised I didn't know about the party." She glanced around, her smile tightening. "Dad, this is kind of a professional crowd. I just didn't want you to feel uncomfortable." That one landed. Not because it was harsh, but because it was real. That's how she saw me now, a potential embarrassment. Not someone to be proud of, but someone to manage. "I understand," I said softly. "I'll head out." She nodded, turning to hand the flowers off to someone else. She didn't even look back. I walked past a group of guests who parted slightly, the way people do when they're not sure if you're staff or family. I gave a nod to her husband. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His face said everything. I didn't know how bad it had gotten. By the time I got to my truck, my hands were shaking, not from anger, just from the sheer weight of being invisible. I sat behind the wheel and watched the house from the rearview mirror. Laughter rose again. Music played. Someone popped open a bottle of champagne. Not one person had followed me out. Not one person had asked me to stay. And that was the moment, the exact moment I knew she hadn't just grown distant. She had quietly decided there was no longer a place for me in her world. I came back for my jacket. I left with a broken heart. I don't know why I forgot it. Maybe I was rattled. Maybe I just needed an excuse to come back. After walking out of that party, I realized I'd left my jacket slung over the back of a chair in the backyard. It wasn't anything fancy, just an old brown windbreaker, but it had my wallet in it, and an old photo of Marjorie I always kept in the inside pocket. So I turned the truck around. The music was still going when I pulled up again, but the backyard had cleared out a bit. Most of the crowd had moved inside, and the laughter was more subdued now. I walked around the side gate, hoping to grab my jacket and leave unnoticed. That's when I heard her voice. It was coming from the open window by the kitchen. I stopped, not out of curiosity but instinct. The way her tone changed, sharp, clipped, businesslike. It didn't sound like party talk. "The paperwork's almost ready," she was saying. "He's becoming more unpredictable. I think it's time we finalize the guardianship." "Guardianship?" I froze. Another voice responded, deeper, male. Sounded like a lawyer, calm, rehearsed. "Well, to establish power of attorney, we'll need some documentation of his cognitive decline. Have you noticed any lapses, memory issues?" She exhaled, like she was tired of explaining. "He's been confused, repetitive, obsessed with old stories. Sometimes he forgets what day it is, and he's living alone in that big house. It's not safe." I leaned closer, trying not to breathe. "You understand," the man continued. "Once we begin this process, it will be harder for him to reverse it later. It has to look voluntary." "Oh, he'll resist," she said flatly. "But once we show how unstable he's getting emotionally, it'll become clear that we're doing the right thing." There was silence. Then she added quietly, almost to herself, "He's just taking up space." My knees buckled slightly. I backed away from the window like I'd just stepped on glass barefoot. I didn't grab the jacket. I didn't even remember I was cold. I just walked back to the truck, hands numb, ears ringing. Guardianship, power of attorney, unstable. Words I never imagined would be used against me, and especially not by the little girl who once made me a birthday card out of construction paper that said, "Best Dad in the Universe." I sat in the truck for a while, engine off, just breathing, staring at my hands, palms open, like I was trying to recognize them. Was I slipping? Was I really becoming forgetful? Sure, I repeated myself sometimes. I liked telling stories, revisiting old moments, but that wasn't confusion. That was memory. That was love. They wanted to call that decline. But I knew what this really was. This wasn't about safety or concern. This was strategy. It was paperwork dressed up as compassion. She wasn't trying to help me, she was trying to contain me. Legally, financially, permanently. I drove home in silence, windows down, letting the cold air sting my face. I didn't want to cry. Not yet. I didn't want to give her that, even if she'd never see it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Marjorie's photo in front of me and a legal pad beside it. I wrote a title at the top. Everything I remember. I started listing. Dates, events, conversations, birthdays, names. Not because I was proving anything, but because I needed to remind myself I was still me. I still had clarity. I still had control. I still had truth. I wrote for hours. And when I was done, I read it all back out loud, just to hear the sound of my own voice. At the very bottom of the page, I wrote one final line. She thinks I'm fading, but I've never seen her more clearly than I do now. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. He brought beer like it was just another Sunday. I wasn't expecting him. I hadn't seen my son-in-law Josh since that dinner party where my daughter made it clear I was no longer welcome in her life. So, when I heard a knock on the door the next afternoon, I assumed it was the mailman, maybe a neighbor. But there he was, on my porch, 2 beers in hand, that same uneasy smile he always wore when he didn't know what to say. I didn't open the door right away, just looked at him through the screen. Mind if I sit? He asked, lifting the beers like a peace offering. I didn't answer, but I pushed the door open and stepped aside. We sat on the porch, late afternoon sun, birds somewhere in the trees. He handed me a beer. I didn't thank him, just held it. For a minute or two, we didn't speak. He fidgeted with the label on his bottle, peeled it halfway off. Then he cleared his throat. She's a lot sometimes, he said. I didn't look at him, just waited. I didn't know she was going to talk to a lawyer, he said, finally. Not at first. Now I looked at him. She told me last week, he continued, his voice low. Said it was for your safety, that you were acting strange, getting forgetful, repeating things. I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe you were just being old, you know? I didn't flinch. I let him talk. But then I saw her file, he said, glancing at me. Printed emails, medical notes, drafts of petitions. She's building a case, Mr. Reynolds, a real one. Building it against me, I said. He nodded, ashamed. I didn't know it was this far, he whispered. I don't know what I thought. That she was venting? That it'd blow over? But she's serious. She wants full legal control. She told me, once I have the paperwork, I can finally fix this mess. Mess? I repeated. He took a long swig of beer. She thinks you're standing in the way. Of the house. Of her peace of mind. She's not saying it out loud, but yeah, that's what this is. I didn't say anything. I just stared at the trees across the street. Josh leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His voice dropped even lower. My dad died when I was 19, he said. Heart attack. Gone in minutes. I would have done anything to have 10 more years with him. Hell, 5. I still think about that every time I see you. Every time you fix something around our place, you reminded me of him. Quiet, steady, reliable. I felt something twist in my chest. I didn't stop her, he said. That's on me. I didn't fight her because I didn't want to lose her, but now I'm starting to realize I already have. We sat in silence for a while after that, just the creak of the porch swing and the buzz of late summer insects. Then I asked, Why are you telling me this now? He looked up. Because you deserve to know what's coming, and because I don't think she's doing the right thing, but I'm not strong enough to stop her. That was the most honest thing he'd ever said. I'm not asking you to stop her, I said, finally. I'm just asking you to see her, the way I finally had to. He nodded slowly. Look, he said, standing. I'm not going to pretend I've got courage now, but if you ever need someone to say what they saw, I will. I'll tell the truth. I believed him. For once, I really did. He turned to leave, but before he stepped off the porch, he paused. She doesn't even realize what she's become, he said softly. It's like she's chasing some version of success that doesn't have room for anyone who reminds her of where she came from. I didn't reply. After he left, I sat with the unopened beer still in my hand. My daughter was preparing to take everything: my freedom, my legacy, my name. But now, at least, I wasn't the only one who saw it. I had a witness. The name I once wrote in love, I now crossed out with pain. The next morning, I called Martin Keller, the only man I ever trusted with my will. He was retired now, mostly, but he still kept a small office behind the old courthouse, sandwiched between a tax preparer and a shuttered sandwich shop. The same dusty desk, same squeaky leather chair, same photograph of his late wife by the window. When I walked in, he stood slowly and smiled. "Well, I'll be," he said. "I didn't expect to see you for another few years." "Didn't expect to need to come," I said. He looked at my face for a long second and then nodded solemnly. "Let's sit." I didn't sugarcoat it. I told him everything. About the party, about the overheard conversation, about the brochure, about the son-in-law's confession, about the daughter I didn't recognize anymore. Martin listened quietly, fingers steepled in front of him. When I finished, I pulled a folder from my coat pocket. Inside were my current will, property deeds, and a photograph of Marjorie holding our daughter at age 2. I placed it gently on his desk. "I want everything changed," I said. "All of it." He leaned back in his chair, exhaled through his nose. "You're sure?" "As sure as I've ever been." We worked in silence for nearly 2 hours. He redrafted the will from scratch. We removed Katie's name entirely. I had him name the house my house to a trust. That trust would be converted into a nonprofit in my wife's name, Marjorie's House. It would serve as transitional housing for veterans. That had been Marjorie's dream once. She used to volunteer at the VA hospital, baking cookies and sitting with the men who had no visitors. She told me once, "You never come back from war the same, but you can come back with dignity if someone leaves a light on." That stuck with me. Now, I was leaving the light on. "I want to add a no contest clause," I said. "If anyone disputes the will, everything goes to a national charity. Not just the house, all of it." Martin raised an eyebrow. "You're serious?" "She'll come for it," I said, "but not if she knows she could lose everything." We finished the paperwork. I initialed every page, signed the last with a hand that trembled only slightly. When it was done, I sat there, staring at the fresh ink on the final line. Martin didn't speak right away. Then he said, "This doesn't look like revenge to me. It looks like protection." "Maybe both," I admitted, "but she's taken enough." He nodded. "Would Marjorie be proud of this?" he asked softly. I looked at the picture again. Marjorie in a floral dress, smiling down at Katie, who was grinning with sticky fingers and wild curls. I think she'd tell me it's about time. Martin made copies, filed what needed to be filed, locked the originals in his cabinet. When I stepped out into the sunlight, it was brighter than I remembered. Something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just an old man anymore. I was the guardian of my own name, the protector of my story, and the father who finally said, "Enough." She came smiling, but her hands shook. It was a Tuesday morning, quiet, ordinary. I'd just made coffee and was sitting at the kitchen table reading through some old letters Marjorie had written me back in 2082. The knock on the door wasn't loud. In fact, I almost didn't hear it over the percolator. But when I opened it, there she was. Katie, hair pinned up, slacks, and a light blue blouse. Makeup done, but not overdone just enough to say I'm in control. She smiled. "Hi, Dad." I stood in the doorway a second longer than I should have before stepping aside. "You want coffee?" She waved a hand. No. I'm on a tight schedule." She walked in like she still lived there. Looked around briefly, not with nostalgia, but with assessment, like she was taking inventory, measuring windows with her eyes. I sat back down. She didn't. Instead, she opened her purse and pulled out a shiny trifold brochure and slid it across the table. "Just take a look," she said. I stared at it. Glossy images of smiling seniors, freshly mowed lawns, and wide beige hallways. Cedar Glen, where your golden years feel like home. "It's a great place," she continued, rehearsed. "Private rooms, on-site medical, weekly bingo nights." I didn't touch the brochure. "They even have a shuttle to the town library," she added, as if that was the selling point. I looked up at her. not angry, not surprised, just tired. "This what you came for?" I asked. "I came because I care," she said sharply, then softened. "I know you think I'm being pushy, but Dad, I worry about you. You're alone out here. What if something happens?" "Something has happened," I said. "You just don't want to talk about it." She blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean?" "I mean the lawyer, the papers, the plan to take over everything while I'm still breathing." Her mouth opened, then closed. I leaned back in my chair. "You thought I didn't know." She sighed and sat down across from me. "Okay, maybe I got ahead of myself, but I was just trying to protect you. You've been different lately." "I've been the same man I've always been," I said calmly. "You just stopped liking him." Her eyes flicked down. "This house is too much for you. The bills, the maintenance." "It was too much when your mother died, too," I cut in. "But I stayed. For you." She said nothing. I picked up the brochure and flipped it closed. The fake smiles disappeared. "Why now?" I asked. "What's the rush?" She hesitated. Then she looked me straight in the eye and said something honest. "For once. Because I want to start fresh. Josh and I are trying to refinance. And I thought if you were settled, we could finally claim the house." I finished for her. Silence. "That's it, isn't it?" I said. "This house is the last thing you think you don't control." Her shoulders slumped, just a little. The mask cracked. "I thought we could both move on," she said. "This house, it's just sitting here. You're just sitting here." I stood up, not in anger, just slowly, grounded. "I've worked my whole life to give you a place in this world," I said, "and now you're trying to take mine out from under me." She stood too, reaching for her purse. "I didn't come here to fight." "No, you came here to sign me away." She paused at the door, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I nodded. "But you did." She opened the door but didn't leave right away. "You know," she said, not looking at me, "Mom used to say you were the strongest person she knew, that you'd never need help, but maybe even strong people get tired." I met her eyes. "I'm tired, Katie, but not of living here. I'm tired of proving I deserve to." She swallowed hard, then walked out. When the door closed, I looked down at the brochure in my hand. I folded it once, then again, and I dropped it in the trash. That night, I laid out everything on the table: the new will, the property deed, my journal entries, printouts of the guardianship process. I backed up audio recordings from my porch conversations, copied legal documents twice. I wasn't just an old man with a house anymore. I was a man with proof, a man with a plan. She thought I'd fold like paper. But this house wasn't built by someone soft. It was built by a husband, a father, a veteran, and I was ready to fight for it. I wasn't invited to dinner. I showed up anyway. It was the following Friday. I heard through Ellie again, same grocery clerk, that Katie and Josh were hosting a dinner for his firm. Some big promotion. Their house would be full of colleagues, managers, polished guests with thin smiles and firm handshakes. I wasn't supposed to know. I wasn't supposed to come, but I did. I wore my best blazer, the same one I wore to Katie's graduation, and polished my shoes until they stopped looking like work boots. I brought nothing. No gift, no flowers. Just the truth, and a folder full of facts. When I arrived, I knocked on the front door. Katie answered it herself. She looked stunning, makeup perfect, dress elegant, heels high. But her face faltered when she saw me. "Dad," she whispered, "what are you—" "I came for dinner," I said, stepping past her before she could block the doorway. The house smelled like rosemary chicken and ambition. People were scattered across the living room, wine glasses clinking, voices soft and curated. Josh saw me from the kitchen. His eyes widened slightly, but he didn't move, didn't stop me, didn't warn her. I waited until everyone had gathered at the long dining table. White cloth, real silverware, the kind of dinner where everyone waits for a toast before they eat. So I stood. "I won't stay long," I said, "but I have a few words, and I think you all deserve to hear them." Katie's face turned to porcelain. Her fork froze midair. I opened the folder and held up the first page. "This is a transcript of a conversation held here in this house, where my daughter discussed declaring me mentally unfit in order to gain legal guardianship and control of my estate." Gasps. Actual gasps. Some guests turned toward her, others looked down into their wine. She said I was unstable, confused, a danger to myself. I looked around the table, meeting eyes one by one. I have lived in my home for 38 years. I repaired its walls, buried my wife from its porch, raised my daughter in its halls. And this week, that same daughter tried to hand me a brochure for an assisted living center with fake smiles and monitored bathrooms. Katie stood suddenly, face red. Dad, this is not the time. No, I said, calm. This is exactly the time. I turned to Josh. Did you know she's already filed the preliminary paperwork? She told the lawyer I was becoming confused. You sat on my porch and told me you'd be honest. This is your chance. He didn't speak, his jaw clenched, eyes downcast. I moved to the end of the table and laid down the revised will, the trust documentation, and the no contest clause for all to see. I've removed her from everything, I said clearly. This house, the one she wanted, will become a nonprofit in my wife's name, a shelter for veterans, something that actually helps people. More murmurs now, heads shaking. One woman muttered, "My God." Katie looked like she'd been slapped. You came here to humiliate me? No, I said. You did that all on your own. I came here to tell the truth because I refuse to go quietly into the dark just because it makes you uncomfortable. Josh finally spoke, voice low. She didn't tell me she went through with the paperwork. She turned on him. Don't start. Enough, I said. This isn't about whether you can spin it to look like care. It's about control. You didn't want to help me. You wanted to manage me, to own what I built. I looked down the table one last time. She thinks I'm fading, but I've never seen her more clearly than I do now. Then I looked at her, steady and unshaken. You taught me what family really is by not being it. I turned and walked away from the table. No one followed me. Not a soul said a word. But I heard it, that kind of silence that only follows truth. The kind that lingers. The kind that changes things. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. For once, the silence was louder than the betrayal. After that dinner, the phone stopped ringing altogether. Not even spam calls. It was like I'd slipped off the grid, vanished into a space where fathers aren't needed and old men are just background noise. At first, I kept expecting anyone to show up, Josh, Katie, even one of her colleagues. I thought maybe someone would knock and say, "Heard what happened, just wanted to check on you." But no one did. Instead, the house was still, too still. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes with peace. It was the kind that wraps itself around your shoulders and presses against your ribs. That kind that makes every floorboard creak sound like it's asking a question you don't want to answer. I'd always liked solitude, preferred it even. But this wasn't solitude. This was something lonelier, something colder. I made coffee every morning, like clockwork. Saturday at the same kitchen table. Watched the same corner of the yard where Marjorie used to grow her tomatoes. I couldn't bring myself to weed it. It had become a soft little grave for memories. And yet, I didn't regret what I'd done, not once. Because it was honest. And in a world where your own child could strip you of your dignity with a signature, honesty was the last thing I had left. I went days without speaking. I'd nod to the mailman, wave to the neighbor across the street, but my voice stayed in my throat, unused, like a violin waiting to be played again. Then, one evening, I wandered into the back room, the one we used to call the mud room, and found a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside, old photographs, school art projects, handwritten recipes. Marjorie's handwriting, soft and slanted, stared back at me from every note. Grocery lists, birthday cake instructions, a Christmas card she never mailed. At the very bottom was a folded piece of yellowed paper nearly brittle with time. On it, in her handwriting, was a quote I didn't remember. When you feel like you've lost your place in the world, make one for someone else. That was Marjorie. Simple, clear, unshakably kind. I sat with that note in my lap for a long while. The light outside was golden, slanting through the window like it was blessing the room itself. And something shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. But something loosened inside me like a knot had quietly come undone. Later that night, I opened a notebook. Not my journal, this was a fresh one. At the top of the page, I wrote, Marjorie's House, Phase 1. I didn't know what I was building yet, but I knew why. Because this house wasn't going to rot around me like a forgotten relic, and I wasn't going to spend my final years waiting for apologies that would never come. I was going to leave something living behind. A place where someone could sit with their shame and still be welcomed. A place where a veteran could rest without fear of being forgotten. A place where silence meant safety, not abandonment. I started listing what I'd need: permits, volunteers, calls to the local VFW. I even circled the number for that old construction buddy I hadn't seen since 2004. I wasn't sure who would help, or if anyone would, but for the first time in weeks, I wasn't waiting on Katie. I wasn't waiting on anyone. I was building something that didn't need her name attached. The hallway was still quiet, but now it echoed with something else. Purpose. The house she wanted became a home for others. I didn't start with big speeches or announcements. I started with one call. To Jack Morgan, a man I hadn't spoken to in almost 2 decades. We used to serve on the local planning board together, back when I still believed in town meetings and community barbecues. I didn't think he'd remember me, but he did. "Reynolds?" he said. "Still alive?" "Barely," I joked. "But the house is, and I've got an idea." Within a week, he brought over some forms and a folder of contacts. Zoning permits, tax codes, nonprofit filings, all the things that had once overwhelmed me now felt like steps. Steps towards something better. Next, I called the local VFW. Left a message. Didn't expect a reply. But 3 days later, I got a knock on the door from a man named Lester, Vietnam vet. Big hands, quiet voice. Said he heard I was thinking about turning my house into a shelter. "I want to help," he said. "Been looking for a reason to use these hands again." I put him to work on day 1. Then came Rita, a retired social worker who still had folders full of unused grant proposals. She said she'd help with fundraising, outreach, vetting processes. I told her, "You're hired," even though no one was getting paid. Word spread. I didn't try to stop it. Soon enough, a group of young guys from the community college came by on Saturdays to haul debris, scrub walls, and repaint the porch. One of them even patched up the fence Katie had always said she'd get around to fixing. The house changed slowly, but with purpose. One room at a time, it became less mine and more ours. I turned the den into a counseling space. The old guest room, the one Katie used to sleep in, got new bunk beds and blackout curtains. The garage was cleared for storage and donation bins. I took down all the family pictures from the main hallway. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. This wasn't a shrine anymore. This was Marjorie's house, and every wall deserved a new memory. Then, one morning, I got a letter in the mailbox, handwritten, no return address. Just 3 words on the front: "Can I help?" Inside was a short note from my grandson. I hadn't seen him in over a year, not since the Christmas I spent alone. The last time we'd talked, he was buried in his phone while Katie scolded me for giving him too much sugar. But here was his handwriting, sloppy, rushed, teenage. "Mom doesn't know I'm writing, but I heard what happened. I think it sucks. I want to help, if you'll let me. I remember your pancakes." I stared at that line for a long time. Then I wrote back, "I'll let you help. No questions asked, just show up." That Saturday, he did. He arrived in a baggy hoodie and worn-out sneakers, hands in pockets. We didn't hug, we didn't cry. We just nodded and got to work. He swept out the shed, painted baseboards, helped Lester patch the roof. And when I brought out an old griddle and asked if he wanted pancakes, he said, "Only if you burn the first one like you used to." I did. We sat on the porch with syrup dripping down paper plates, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I'd lost everything. I felt like I was rebuilding. That night, I updated the plaque I'd been designing for the front door. It would read, "Marjorie's house, for those who served and were forgotten." And underneath, "Come in, you're safe here." I didn't need Katie's approval. I didn't need anyone's blessing. The foundation had already been laid not just in wood and nails, but in second chances. And this time, I was building for more than just my blood. I was building for everyone who ever needed to feel kept. They came in 1s and 2s, veterans, volunteers, neighbors. By mid-autumn, the house didn't creak with emptiness anymore. It echoed with life. Every room had a purpose now. Every hallway buzzed with soft footsteps, the clink of coffee mugs, the hum of second chances. What once was a quiet, aging man's home had turned into something alive. Marjorie's house had become real. Lester moved in first. He brought only 2 duffel bags, one for clothes, one for memories he said he hadn't unpacked in years. He took the room with the view of the backyard and spent most mornings sitting by the window with a crossword and a glass of weak orange juice. Next came Donovan, a younger vet from the Gulf War era. Tough guy, tattooed arms, but jittery at night. He was the one who started fixing the old radio in the kitchen, said the silence made him nervous. Can't sleep when it's too quiet, he admitted. So we let the radio play jazz mostly from sunrise to sundown. Then Rita connected us with local churches who wanted to donate furniture, fresh sheets, food supplies. One lady brought over a stack of quilts she'd been sewing for years, each one stitched with Bible verses. I didn't read much scripture anymore, but I let her lay one across each bed. Her smile reminded me of Marjorie's. We didn't have rules carved in stone, just respect. Everyone pitched in. We cooked together, cleaned together. Even the youngest volunteer, a college kid named Mateo, started calling the front porch the quiet zone and made a little hand-painted sign for it. And then there was my grandson. He kept showing up. Every Saturday at first, then Wednesdays too. Then he started staying for dinner. He didn't talk much about his mom, and I didn't ask. He just showed up, toolbox in hand, always ready to paint or hammer or haul something out to the curb. Once, I caught him standing in the hallway staring at an old photo I'd hung Marjorie holding a pie. Flower on her nose. That's how I remember her, he said. She always smelled like vanilla. He said it like it hurt to remember, like it healed too. I gave him the room at the top of the stairs, the one Katie used to sleep in. I told him it was his if he ever needed to get away. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. One evening, after dinner, we sat on the porch, just the two of us. Stars were starting to come out, and the old radio was playing faintly through the screen door. He turned to me and asked, "Do you ever miss her?" "Every day," I said. He nodded. "I don't think Mom knows how to." I didn't respond. That felt like his truth to carry, not mine to agree with. But I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Shame, maybe, or clarity. Maybe both. A week later, he brought a new picture to hang in the dining room, a photo of Marjorie in the garden, sun hat crooked, tomatoes in her hands. "She'd like what this place has become," he said, and he was right. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a home, not because of blood, but because of presence, because of people who showed up when no one expected them to. I'd spent months mourning the daughter who stopped seeing me as her father. But somewhere in that loss, I found a room full of strangers who treated me like one. I wasn't needed in the way I used to be, fixing homework or funding college or mending broken toys. But I was useful again. I was trusted. I was looked to. And for a man my age, that's everything. They'd ask, "Where do we put this shelf?" Or, "Can you look at this wiring?" Or, "What's the best way to patch drywall?" And I'd smile because after all the pain, the betrayal, the silent dinners, and forgotten birthdays, here were people who wanted my hands, my knowledge, my stories. Not because they could get something from me, but because they saw something in me. That's when I realized family isn't who shares your name. It's who shows up when your walls are bare and helps you repaint them with purpose. Katie never came by, but once I saw her car slow down across the street. She didn't park. She didn't wave. She just watched as Lester swept the porch, as my grandson watered the garden, as a group of volunteers strung up fairy lights across the fence for the Veterans' Thanksgiving. Then she drove away, and that was enough. She had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. She stood at the door like she'd never been here before. It was just past 7 p.m. on a Thursday. The porch light was on. Lester was inside, watching the news. My grandson was upstairs, repainting a closet. I was at the kitchen sink, rinsing out mugs, when I heard the knock. Not the mailman, not a volunteer, not someone dropping off another donation box. This one was slow, hesitant. When I opened the door, I saw her. Katie. Her hair was pulled back. No makeup, no designer coat. She wore a sweatshirt I remembered from years ago, one I'd given her when she left for college. It looked small on her now, stretched across her shoulders, faded at the seams. She looked older. Not in the way time makes you older, in the way regret does. "Hi," she said. I nodded. "Didn't expect you." She glanced past me into the house. It's different. It is. She hesitated, then stepped onto the porch, but not inside. Her hands were clasped in front of her. No brochure, no paperwork, no plastic smile. I'm not here to ask for anything, she said quietly. I needed to see it. See you. I said nothing. Let her speak on her own time. You know, she continued, I used to think you were invincible, like nothing could touch you. You worked. You fixed everything. You never complained. I did, just not out loud. That got a small smile from her, a tired one. She looked down at her shoes. I've been angry for a long time, and I told myself you were the reason, that you were too stuck in the past, too stubborn. But really, I think I just didn't want to see how much I'd changed. The wind rustled the bushes near the porch steps. The air smelled faintly of rain. I didn't come to ask you to change anything, she said. I know I'm not in the will anymore. I know about the house. You heard? Josh told me. Eventually. I raised an eyebrow. You still with him? She shrugged, trying. But I don't know. He sees me differently now. So do I. We stood in silence for a moment. Then she asked, May I come in? I thought about it. Thought about Marjorie's laugh in the kitchen. The nights I spent alone in this house, wondering where I'd gone wrong. The years of raising her with everything I had. The party, the lawyer, the brochure. I thought about Lester, about my grandson, about the men sleeping under my roof tonight who knew me not as Katie's father, but as the man who gave them shelter without judgment. Then I stepped aside. You can come in, I said, but just for a visit. She nodded. She didn't walk through the house like she owned it. She walked slowly, carefully, as if each room was a museum of the life she used to live and the father she used to know. She paused in the hallway, where the plaque now hung, Marjorie's house, for those who served and were forgotten. Her fingers brushed the wood frame. She'd love this, she whispered. I think so too. In the kitchen, she sat at the table. No wine, no food, just a glass of water. Do they like it here? She asked. They feel safe. That's more than I gave you. I didn't respond. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something, a photo. It was crumpled, edges worn. Katie, at age 6, sitting on my shoulders, both of us grinning like fools at a county fair. I kept this, she said, even when I told myself I didn't need you anymore. I looked at it, then handed it back. You don't need to prove anything to me, I said, but I'm not going backward, Katie. Not for guilt, not for blood. She nodded, her eyes glassy. I know. You're welcome here, I added, but only if you come as a visitor, not a claimant. I don't want the house. Good, I said, because it was never yours to take. She swallowed hard. Will you ever forgive me? I leaned back in my chair, looked at the girl who used to hold my hand while crossing the street, the woman who tried to take my life and reshape it into something convenient. I already have, I said, but forgiveness doesn't mean I forget. It doesn't mean things go back to what they were. She nodded again, stood. I should go. I walked her to the door. As she stepped out, she turned once more. Thank you for letting me see what you built. I didn't build it alone, I said, but I built it without you. She didn't take offense. She just looked tired, hollow, but maybe, just maybe, a little more honest. I watched her walk down the steps, back to her car. She didn't ask for anything, didn't offer anything either, and that was okay. Some visits are meant to be quiet. Some doors once shut are better left that way. Would you have let her back in, or was he right to close the door? Tell us in the comments. Sunlight spilled through the windows on opening day. The ribbon fluttered in the breeze, tied between the porch columns, Marjorie once decorated with garlands every Christmas. The morning was crisp, cloudless, one of those rare days when the air feels like a clean slate. The sign above the door gleamed with fresh paint. Marjorie's house, for those who served and were forgotten, underneath in smaller letters. Come in. You're safe here. The front yard was full, not packed, not noisy, but full in the way that matters. People showed up, not because of who I used to be or what I once gave, but because they believed in what this house had become. Lester stood beside me, tie crooked, nervous as hell. Donovan was on the steps holding a tray of lemonade, cracking jokes with 2 new residents we'd just welcomed last week. Rita fluttered around with name tags and flyers, her clipboard never leaving her hand. My grandson stood near the back, next to a banner he'd helped paint the night before. He'd spelled community wrong at first, left out the second M, but we left it that way. Felt more human. Someone handed me a pair of scissors, gold-handled, heavy. A local reporter asked if I wanted to say a few words. I cleared my throat. The crowd hushed. I didn't build this house for recognition, I began, and I didn't build it out of anger. My eyes found the faces around me, veterans, students, single parents, neighbors, old friends. I built it because I know what it feels like to be forgotten, to give your life to something to someone and still be left behind. This house isn't a monument, it's a response. It says, you matter. You still have value. You're not done. I paused. My wife, Marjorie, used to say the heart of a home isn't its walls, it's the people who feel safe inside it. She was right. A few people clapped. A few wiped their eyes. I smiled, just a little. Then I raised the scissors and cut the ribbon. No grand cheers, no streamers or flashbulbs. Just quiet nods, claps on the back, and the soft shuffle of feet crossing the threshold into a place that now belonged to all of us. Inside, the air smelled of lemon polish and fresh bread. Someone had baked. Someone else had brought flowers. The walls, once faded and cracked, were warm and clean. Photographs hung in the hallway, not of me or Katie, but of the residents. Smiling, whole, here. One of the new guys, a quiet Marine named Ellis, stepped into the dining room and whispered, "This feels like the first real home I've had in 10 years. I just nodded. That was the whole point. Later, I found myself out back, sitting in Marjorie's old rocking chair, now fixed and repainted. My grandson joined me, handing me a cup of tea he'd sweetened just the way I liked. "You did it," he said. "No," I said. "We did." He smiled. "You think she'd be proud?" I didn't answer right away, just looked around at the clothesline someone had strung between the trees, the planters full of tomatoes, the bench under the oak tree where Lester now read every morning. Then I said, "I think she'd finally exhale." The sun dipped lower. Laughter floated from inside the house. Someone turned on the radio smooth jazz again, just soft enough to feel like memory. Then, something unexpected happened. Katie's car pulled up to the curb. She didn't get out, just sat there for a few moments, watching. And for the first time, I didn't tense up. I didn't brace myself for intrusion or manipulation. I just watched her watching. She didn't need to come in. She didn't need to speak. Some things end quietly. Eventually, she drove away. And this time, the silence she left behind wasn't heavy. It was peace. I turned to my grandson. "You hungry?" He grinned. "Always." We went inside together. And as the screen door creaked shut behind us, I looked around one last time. At the home that had once been filled with memories of a daughter who drifted, now alive with the stories of people who stayed. This house, they said, was for the forgotten, but it never forgot me. She called me worthless. But worthless men don't build legacies. They don't rebuild homes from heartache, and they don't fill them with strangers who become family. This house stands because I stood, and now, long after I'm gone, Marjorie's house will keep standing.